So I am not a philosopher, as people probably know. So I don't want to make wholesale prescriptions for all of philosophy. But as a social scientist and science and technology studies scholar, the thing I think that humanities and social sciences can really bring to the fore in social robotics is the salience of the human element as the source of what is social. So over the years, I've gotten more and more experience in kind of working on the design of robots and participating in some of the technical building. And I've become aware of how easy it is to get kind of really focused on the complexities of that, the excitement, the inevitable frustrations of trying to develop new technology. And I think sometimes it makes it easy to kind of lose track of the people maybe that you're designing the robots for, or who's going to use it, who's going to be affected, what the broader societal consequences will be. And I see this in research, I see this in the human-robot interaction classes that I teach. And so I think that the critical and human-centered perspectives that philosophy can bring, the humanities, the social sciences can bring, can really kind of pinpoint to how humans can benefit from social robots, but also how to be more critical about what kinds of robots really should be designed or need to be designed and how they can be applied. I am taking this lecture perhaps as to kind of a opportunity to be a little selfish and reflect on some of the concepts and questions that have come up in my own research over the years. And I particularly want to kind of consider some of the interactions between kind of people and then the design of social robots, how we think of about ourselves and our cultures, and how we design social robots. Think about it critically, and then think through maybe how I could include these more critical perspectives in my own approaches to social robot design. So the main thread that I want to explore is how social robots co-evolve with our ideas of ourselves, of culture, of work, of the home, where we want to deploy robots more and more, and also of our care for each other. And as I've been thinking through this, I particularly became interested in one of Haraway's concepts called companion species, and I want to think through it in relation to robots. So Haraway talks about it in relations to humans and dogs and their coevolution over time. But I want to think of robots as companion artifacts for the purpose of the talk. And then through the concept, I want to think about maybe how humans relate to robots as a kind of other, how we co-evolve with these artifacts, how we might coexist with them, and then to use these questions to raise ethical issues about the role of social robots in the way we design not just the robots themselves, but also our future cultures and societies. And as I mentioned, I also want to think about how these critical perspectives can be incorporated into robot design. And particularly, I'm interested in more participatory and collaborative research with different communities of users. So I'm going to be talking about that as well. I thought a little bit about the three concepts that might make sense to know about before coming into my talk. So one of them is the notion of domestication. As I mentioned just before, we think of robots as something that we want to see more of in our everyday environments, in our homes, schools, in care institutions. And I want to think about what that means for bringing technologies that were developed in a more industrial setting, initially in a more controlled setting, into these more intimate, perhaps less organizationally controlled spaces. So I mentioned also that I'm going to think about this and talk about this term of companion species that comes from Haraway. And Haraway also thinks about this process of domestication. She focuses on humans and dogs. I'm going to talk about humans and robots. But she thinks of it as an emergent process of cohabiting. And so I want to think about what that might mean in terms of robots. So if you have a chance to just think about domestication and what it means to you. We're familiar with it in terms of animals of all kinds. You know, that might be one to look into. As I mentioned, there's also this concept of companion species from Haraway, which talks about the coevolution of the mutual relationships between dogs and humans in her case. I want to think about it in terms of humans and robots, but it also brings out particular questions about the specific history of the relationship, the ethics and politics of it. So if you have a chance to go and check that out, that would be relevant to my talk. And then finally, I want to go back to a term that I started thinking about even as a doctoral student in conversations with my advisor, Linda Caparel. And it's the term called repeated assembly, which you can think of in terms of human development over time, but it really looks at how you can kind of link certain patterns, social, developmental, psychological patterns that we can see in people, in groups of people, in societies, how you can link them across different spatial and temporal levels. So things like linking individuals and culture, and making these kind of adjustments over time and space. So those are the three that that I think you could take a look at before you come to the talk, but I'll explain them at the talk so you don't have to try too hard. Don't worry.